From taking the first photograph of our planet to receiving mysterious alien signals from Earth-like planets, this is the entire history of space exploration that you have never seen before.
The greater our knowledge increases, the greater our ignorance unfolds.
And to understand where it all begins, let's teleport all the way back to the 16th century, where this Italy-based astronomer was looking at the controversial shape of the moon. During that time, it was believed that the moon had a perfect round shape, but Galileo could not believe what he saw that night. After looking through his uniquely built telescope, he was astonished to notice several mountains and enormous cup-like depressions on the moon's surface. However, for almost 180 years, these structures remained a mystery for many experts, until 1791 when this German astronomer named them craters that are caused by enormous meteors, a similar one that destroyed the entire species of dinosaurs from our planet. But apart from such destructive stones, humans were eager to discover what lies beyond the surface of the moon. So, in pursuit of this curiosity, in 1668, one of the leading astronomers, Isaac Newton, created a revolutionary telescope that finally helped us see what exists beyond the naked eye. A mysterious world that every astronomer, scientist, and research organization is still trying to understand, yet they cannot truly explain what actually lies beyond. Fortunately, all of this was captured by Newton's reflecting telescope, which led German-British astronomer to another breakthrough discovery. While looking at the rings of this object in 1781, William Herschel was astonished to notice its mysterious figure. He was questioning how can an object have perfectly shaped rings around it? It could be a comet or a temporary disk that could soon fade away. But the more he analyzed this object, the more curious he became. When he reached the conclusion, it turned out that it was none other than the 7th planet in our solar system. With an average temperature of 195 degrees Celsius today, we call it Uranus. Now, when you try to look at Uranus's level of distance from Earth, will make it difficult to spot at night. But the moon during its full phase cannot be ignored by the naked eye. The picture you are looking at was taken from Alabama, USA. Sure, it was captured from one of the most expensive telescopes on the planet. However, if you rewind back to 1840, then the same planet would have looked like this. This is the first photograph of the moon captured by the British photographer John William Draper. Now, it may not look as clear and beautiful as the one recovered from the USA, but none of this would have happened if John did not take the initiative back then. What comes to your mind if you get the chance to look at the galaxy through the naked eye? Surrounded with millions of stars and a supermassive black hole at the center, it was impossible to believe how gravity binds them together. And if we zoom in further, there are an endless number of objects to catch our attention. Most importantly, the beauty of our Milky Way galaxy, which is visible from various countries. It's like a God's work of art that no human or even AI can imagine. But there is something mysterious about the spiral nature of these galaxies. Why do galaxies look the same? For decades, Ireland astronomer William Parsons studied the star-forming regions called nebula, yet he could not understand what lies underneath this world. Until one day he noticed the spiral nature of a galaxy called M51. This was the first ever image of a spiral galaxy. In fact, William was so mesmerized by this discovery that he created this hand-drawn art of the same and named it Whirlpool Galaxy. Being recognized as the tallest building in the world, Burj Khalifa has 163 floors. The view from above looks like this. But what if we have an enormous ladder that connects one planet to another? Specifically speaking, what if we have an elevator that connects Earth directly to the moon? All we have to press the button and exit towards another planet. This may sound like science fiction, but in 1895, Russian rocket scientist Konstantin was the first one to suggest this idea to the world. According to him, an Earth-based elevator can be connected to the surface of nearby planets. By keeping both ends stronger, people can travel faster, cheaper, and better than rockets to other worlds. Although this idea is still at its proposal stage, imagine what would happen if we could have this elevator in the next few years. Not only it could save us from polluted rockets, but also it could speed up the process of transferring cargo and other machinery to dominate new planets. Most importantly, we could get the chance to witness a distant world from another planet. Fortunately, to obtain a bigger view, we don't have to land in another world. Thanks to Netherlands astronomer Adriaan van, who in 1917 noticed something unusual that changed our entire perspective about this unexplainable world. Shining at 14.1 light-years away, Adriaan could not believe what he saw. It was a planet that was 30% shorter than the Sun, but existed outside our solar system. Adriaan named it Van Manen 2. But how can a planet exist outside of our solar system? This means there is the possibility of similar worlds like ours. Now, this planet no longer emits energy. Nonetheless, as it was the first discovery of planets beyond our solar system, it gave future astronomers enough motivation to explore more. With the formation of the Soviet Union, it was time to push space exploration to a bigger level. Joseph Stalin, the leader of the Soviet Union, was adamant about keeping Russia forward. As a result, in 1924, he formed a specialized group of astronomers who would lead in the race of space exploration. They called it the Society for Studies of Interplanetary Travel, which also included Konstantin as one of their leading members. However, before Joseph Stalin could achieve a breakthrough, just 2 years later, the United States came up with an astonishing response. As the world was focused on exploring the universe through telescope, the US created an object that could help us get closer like never before. In 1926, American inventor Robert Goddard created the world's first liquid-fueled rocket. Despite this weird-looking rocket, he not only launched it successfully, but also convinced future generations to see the world from a different perspective. Surprisingly, within the next 15 years of this project, Robert launched 34 rockets that reached the height of 2.6 kilometers with a speed of 885 kilometers per hour. Although it was around 5% of the speed of current SpaceX rockets, this mission motivated Germany and the UK to form their own group of experts. For example, the formation of the British Interplanetary Society in 1933, and Germany discussing the potential of space travel and its uses of scientific experiments. But then, in the Oklahoma state of the US, something bigger and mysterious was going on. After setting up the world's first radio telescope, American radio engineer Karl Jansky noticed an unusual sound. It was a hiss-like sound and was coming from an unknown origin in the universe. Fortunately, it was the first radio wave detection from an astronomical object, yet Karl was curious to find out its exact origin. Now imagine what would you do if you kept hearing a hiss-like sound from the universe. It could be coming from an alien civilization or something we have never seen or heard before. Well, this was exactly what was going on in Karl's mind. At first, he thought it was coming from the sun, but after following the signal for several months, he noticed that the signal repeats every 23 hours and 56 minutes and was coming from a position away from the sun. Finally, after comparing his data with astronomical maps, Karl could not believe the location from where it was coming from. The mysterious signal was coming from our Milky Way galaxy, and not from the north or south side of the galaxy, but coming from the center of the galaxy. When Karl announced this discovery to the public, the entire United States became curious to find more. Even the New York Times and a special NBC program interviewed him over radio sounds from among the stars. Not to mention, Karl's article on electrical disturbances apparently of extraterritorial origin was also published in the leading scientific journal. However, what happened after was something he never imagined. During that time, Karl needed more investment to find out its true origin. Unfortunately, with the sudden appearance of the Great Depression, his mission remained in the background. As a result, no one was able to discover who was sending these radio waves from the center of the Milky Way galaxy. Maybe someone was aware of its origin, or maybe it was intentionally hidden from the world. But whatever it was, there is more to this universe than what we could ever imagine. With the Second World War reaching its peak, no one assumed what Hitler was planning in the background. And before the Allied nations like the US, Britain, and France could find out about them, it was too late. This is the world's first long-range rocket that covered a distance of 320 kilometers. However, instead of using it for space exploration's first flight was directed towards killing innocent people. By installing warhead at the top of the rocket, Germany used it to target the city of London and killed more than 9,000 civilians. They called it V2 or Vengeance Weapon 2. Fortunately, after the end of World War II, the United States and the Soviet Union captured its parts for space exploration. In 1946, just 1 year after the end of World War II, America hired German engineers and managed to launch the very first space research flight. The same year, they also captured the first image of Earth from 105 kilometers about. All of this was made possible through the improvised version of the same V2 engine. Even the Soviet Union captured the parts of the V2 and allowed German engineers to support them in space exploration. And then, with the desperate need to explore the universe, the United States was the first one to send animals into space. However, what was thought to be a test for survivability turned out to be a disaster for innocent beings. Specifically speaking, the animals were sent out to test how humans could survive in future space missions. Unfortunately, in the next few decades, many different species failed to survive in space and died before they could reach back on Earth alive. Monkeys, apes, dogs, tortoises, spiders, and even fish were among the few of them. Surprisingly, none of these consequences were enough to stop the race of space exploration. That's because after the United States, the Soviet Union, France, China, and Japan followed the same strategy. But were they enough to solve this problem? During the 1960s, the Soviet Union sent around 57 dogs in space. Now, the reason why they chose dogs is that according to scientists, dogs have the ability to survive longer in harsh environments. Most importantly, they chose stray dogs for this mission, who showed greater signs of survivability. At first, many of them died and lost contact due to technical failure. But after reaching the maximum altitude of 110 km, Dezik and Tsygan became the first animals to return safely. It was at that moment when we finally realized that just like animals, humans also have the possibility to safely travel in space. What would happen if we lose Google Maps or any form of communication system in the world? We will be taken back to the same period that existed hundreds of thousands of years ago. We might not communicate instantly with our close ones, get confused in heading towards the right direction, or maybe lose precious someone before hearing their last words. The man you are looking at was one of the leading aerospace engineers for Nazi Germany. In other words, he was one of the closest allies of Hitler, a man who was responsible for killing millions of people alone. But at the same time, Hitler's closest ally is also responsible for creating a machine that now allows every person in the world to connect with each other. After the Second World War, von Braun was secretly hired by the US government to support them in space exploration. Surprisingly, what he created was something that was never done before. Von built this rocket that became the first one to reach the exosphere layer of Earth, 1,000-kilometer height, where we launch all our satellites. The same satellite that today helps us navigate from one place to another. However, no one imagined that the launch of the Jupiter-C rocket would result in a decades-old war between two powerful nations.
We were producing twice as many scientists and engineers as the Soviet Union, and today they're producing twice as many as we are.
Till the end of the year 2000, the world is well aware of the US and Russia's Cold War. But with the might of testing their own nuclear bombs, something bigger was going on in the background. You see, between 1957 and 1989, the United States and USSR were desperate to prove themselves better in space exploration. In fact, during these 3 decades, the two countries were so aggressive in dominating the space is that no other nation decided to intervene between them. From the USSR launching the first artificial satellite to NASA capturing the first photograph of Earth, to the USSR responding with the first human spaceflight, Vostok 1. Not to mention the befitting reply from the United States by landing humans on the moon's surface. But why these two powerful nations were so curious about space? What made them invest millions of dollars into something that no one has a clear answer? Well, the actual reason behind this race goes to this man, Bernard Adolph, also known as one of the most powerful US Air Force generals. You see, in 1957, a few years after the Second World War, Bernard came up with a concept of Space Force. He believed that apart from battling on the ground, the United States Army also needed a floating army in space. As a result, this could not only give them an edge against their enemy, but also help them win every battle. In his words, Bernard said, "In the long haul, our safety as a nation may depend upon achieving space superiority. Several decades from now, the important battles may not be sea battles or air battles, but space battles, and we should be spending a certain fraction of our national resources to ensure that we do not lag in obtaining space supremacy."
The Space Force will help us deter aggression and control the ultimate high ground, because space is the world's newest warfighting domain.
Now imagine what would USSR or present Russia would think of this statement. With the United States being their biggest competitor, the USSR followed the same strategy and invested a significant amount of money in dominating space. For example, the USSR expressed its power by sending the first crew-based flight that lasted 24 hours in space. Then they became the first country to develop contact between two crew-based flights in space. Then they sent the first woman in space, achieved the first spacewalk, the first crew exchange in space, first space station, and first country to gather soil samples from Venus, becoming the first country to grow plants in space and the first country to inhabit a long-term space station. Nonetheless, the US also responded with breakthrough answers, such as becoming the first country to send a space flight with a human pilot, reusing a crew-based spacecraft for the first time, sending 3 crew members in orbit, catching a photograph of another planet from Mars, landing humans on the moon, returning the first samples from another planet, sending the first spacecraft to orbit the sun, and landing the first motor vehicle on Moon. Now, many experts also criticize the capability of the US government. Some even asked how humans land on the moon when a few decades ago they were still building a successful spacecraft. And it does make sense because in 1944, Nazi Germany with its V-2 rocket built the first aircraft in history. But 24 years later, we were shown evidence by the United States about a man jumping on the moon. Nevertheless, in pursuance of these two nations trying to prove each other, we have reached a stage of space exploration from where there is no turning back. That's because after watching the USA and Russia, other nations not only realized the value of Space Force, but also got mesmerized with the untold magic the universe beholds. In 1990, the US, in collaboration with the European Space Agency, built a unique telescope that could be repaired by astronauts in space. As this increases the durability of the machine, our possibility of exploring more is increased. However, the United States never imagined that support from other nations could help us understand the universe better. They called it Hubble Space Telescope, and all of these images were captured by this telescope alone. A high-definition image of the galaxy, capturing an exploding star, and a breathtaking image of the gas giant nebula giving birth to stars. Isn't it astonishing to see and feel how mysterious the universe is? Even experts from Canada and Poland were also baffled to notice planets outside our solar system when they discovered them in 1992. Although exoplanets were first discovered in 1917, after Canada and Poland saw them with their own eyes, curiosity about this universe increased beyond imagination. It was a confirmation that somewhere out there, a civilization is living their time. And by keeping the same thought in mind, a decade later, a revolutionary company was born. In 2002, Elon Musk founded SpaceX with only one vision in mind: to decrease the costs of space launches and colonize one of our closest planets, Mars. Now, at first, everyone thought he was joining this project.
The fast way is drop thermonuclear weapons over the poles.
But what we have seen thus far is a confirmation of Musk's vision. Fortunately, after witnessing SpaceX's achievements, other nations were inspired to follow the same. In 2008, India was the first one to discover water on the moon and prove to the world how significant they consider exploring the universe. A year later, Italy, in collaboration with NASA and Europe, captured the first images of the rings of Saturn. Japan gathered the first samples of an asteroid, and now China proved its worth by not only landing its rover on the far side of the moon, but also returning their samples safely. So, with all these breakthroughs, we can now believe that the most powerful nations are curious to know the truth of this universe. The vision became clearer when in 2021, the USA, Canada, and Europe built the largest space telescope in the world. Maybe there is someone out there waiting for us. Or maybe there is something bigger that the creator of this world does not want us to know. But no matter what lies in this universe, we as humans would never give up on finding the ugly truth. So, what are your thoughts about exploring the world beyond? Do you think alien civilization is already living on Earth?